Dreyfuss from The Nation magazine. All right, y'all, welcome back to the show. It's Antiwar Radio. I'm Scott Horton. I'm talking with Robert Dreyfuss from The Nation magazine. He's the author of the book Devil's Game, How the United States Helped Unleash Fundamentalist Islam. And you want to know about what's going on in the Middle East, you need some background puzzle pieces. You know, like the border, when you're making a puzzle, get that border together first so that you understand the layout, what you're after. Devil's Game. You will learn so much reading that book. I can't even tell you. It will help you. I promise you that. Okay, so the article in question here is Iraq. New alliance takes shape against Maliki-Sadr bloc. And we're talking about American and Iranian influence in Iraq and the struggle for a parliamentary majority. I noticed in here, when we went out to break, Bob, you were saying that one of the risks here is that you could have something like the old Civil War break back out again. And I don't know if you can weave addressing this into that same direction you were going there, but I noticed here that you say that the Supreme Council for Islamic Revolution in Iraq, now the Islamic Supreme Council of Iraq, has broken away from the Iraqi National Alliance, which is now, I guess, completely dominated by Moqtada al-Sadr, and they're throwing in with the old Prime Minister Alawi, right?
Well, they're trying to make that deal. Apparently there was a very raucous meeting of Alawi's party about a week or so ago, and Alawi and his group decided to back the leader of the Supreme Council as their candidate for prime minister, since Alawi feels like he couldn't secure it for himself. And then they were going to go ask the Kurds to come in and support them against Maliki and Sadr. So you have a kind of bifurcation here with the Kurds in the middle, having to decide whether they can pick one or the other of these coalitions, or, as some of the Kurds, like Barzani, have suggested, hold out for some sort of grand coalition involving everybody. The problem there is, who gets to be top dog and how is power shared and everything else. But one thing that's worrying when it comes to the Civil War aspect is that many of the armed Sunnis, the former insurgents who joined with the United States to form the Awakening Movement, or what the military called the Sons of Iraq, they're starting to become increasingly disillusioned about Maliki coming back to power, about the way the Sunnis are being treated, and they're drifting back in some key areas of the country into an insurgency, into possible alliance with the old al-Qaeda group in Iraq that was, seemingly dismantled for the most part, but has carried out quite a few bombings over the last year or two. So, things are sort of poised on a razor's edge, I think, in Iraq. And as I said at the beginning, if the United States and Iran can come to some sort of agreement, then maybe they can get their friends to paper over their differences and form something like an all-points government. But so far, it isn't clear, whether that can actually take place or not.
Is it just American politics that makes it where the politicians can't admit that they really imported the Iranian Revolution? And, I mean, why can't they just say, look, it was George Bush's dumb policy to reverse what Reagan did and bring the Iranians into Iran, but this is the deal and we have to deal with them? Or it's just too much. The political angle, I guess, is just that, no, they're Hitlers, they're devils, and they're crazy, and we can't deal with them. Or else, if we can deal with them, then why can't we deal with them on the nuclear issue and everything else and just be, regular states dealing with each other like states do instead of threats all the time?
Well, I think it's conventional wisdom now in Washington that, yes, indeed, by getting rid of Saddam, it was like, tearing down the dike that had protected the Arab world from Iran for the 2 decades before that, and therefore now Iran has, gained a tremendous influence in a country that it had previously fought an 8-year-long war with. So, sure, I think people are willing to admit that Iran has gained tremendously in Iraq. I give Obama a lot of credit for trying to open a dialogue with Iran. He promised that in the campaign. He started it last year. He sent letters back and forth to Iranian leaders and gave a whole series of speeches about how he wanted to negotiate with Iran. And in fact, they did, you remember last fall, just about a year ago, reach an agreement over Iran's nuclear program that would have, I think, paved the way for a lot of progress. But that deal fell apart, not in the United States, but in Iran. It fell victim to radical politics inside Iran. And unfortunately, the Obama people haven't really figured out how to pick up those pieces yet. So they've fallen back on sanctions and on, a kind of a containment strategy toward Iran, which is not going to lead, I don't think, to a lot of progress on the nuclear front. So right now, I think what the Obama people are struggling with is how do we get the Iran negotiations back on track and have them mean something? And there's 3 parts to that. One is already underway in Afghanistan, where they're talking with Iran over stabilizing that. Mm-hmm. There's about to be talks, I believe, in the next few weeks in Geneva with Iran over the nuclear program. The Iranians say they're going to come back and restart those talks, and perhaps they'll actually go somewhere this time. And then the third part of it would be over Iraq, to sit down and have a dialogue with Iran about Iraq, which is not really, unprecedented. During the Bush administration, the U.S. ambassador in Baghdad had a series of meetings with the Iranian ambassador, who's actually a very senior Revolutionary Guard commander, over Iraq, and so that could restart there too. So, I mean, it's possible to see negotiations developing over the next several months, but it's also possible to see everything going to hell in a handbasket if, these contacts and initial kind of moves don't bear any fruit. And right now I'd say it's about 50-50.
Yeah, I wanted to go over a couple of things there. In Iraq, we basically fought the war, in effect, to install the Supreme Islamic Council and Moqtada al-Sadr and these Iranian-friendly people in power. But they're the majority. They don't really need us. And it seems like a desperate situation that we have to deal with the Iranians. They're the ones who brokered the ceasefire before. They're the ones who brokered Maliki as prime minister before and whatever. They have the influence there. But in Afghanistan, I wonder whether America working with Iran there would just make matters worse, because I would just guess, I don't really know, but I would guess just on the history that they would be working with the Tajiks, the Uzbeks, and the Hazaras and the Northern Alliance types that are working with the Americans against the Pashtun majority. And eventually the Pashtun majority are going to be the winners there when America leaves, and I wonder whether bringing the Iranians in against them, if that is the case, if I'm not assuming too much there, would be counterproductive in the same way bringing the Indians in has been counterproductive to our government's goals there.
Well, it may be counterproductive in one sense, but it's indispensable. I mean, you can't have a stable Afghanistan in which all the non-Pashtun groups in the north and the west of Afghanistan are seething with rage and anger over being pushed out of power and are getting support from Russia and India and Iran. So you need some kind of deal. It's self-evident. You can't have a stable Afghanistan with just these minorities in power, which is what we tried to do after 2001 when we supported what was then the Northern Alliance in pushing the Taliban out. And you can't do it the other way either. You need a deal. And so that means getting all of the interested parties, not just India and Russia and Iran, but also Saudi Arabia and China, and above all Pakistan, to underwrite some kind of, rebalancing of the Afghan government. And that's the diplomatic trick here. Simply making a deal with the Taliban would be insane, because then you alienate all the rest of Afghanistan, and the Afghan army would break apart, and you'd have Afghan fall back into the kind of civil war that it existed in between the departure of the Soviet Union and the takeover of the Taliban in the 1990s.
Yeah, it's the same sort of thing going on in Iraq, where Petraeus made these promises to the Sunnis that he can't keep. It's not up to him. The awakening councils and all that, right?
I'd be careful about making parallels analogies too strong between Afghanistan and Iraq. They're really different situations. But in Afghanistan, you have a clear history of, a generation-long civil war which needs to get resolved. And so far, it's not resolved. And in Iraq, you have a situation where there wasn't a civil war going on in Iraq until very, very recently. And I think a lot of the leaders there are more willing to, compromise and make a deal, because there's less, sort of long existing bad blood.
Yeah. Good point. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time, Bob. I really appreciate it. I hope we can start doing these interviews on a more regular basis. I really learn a lot every time we talk.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Thanks very much. Bob Dreyfuss, everybody, from The Nation magazine, and he's the author of the book Devil's Game. And I know I tell you to read all kinds of things. That's what the show's about. Hey, guys, guess what you could read? But Devil's Game is one that you actually go and get through. You need it.